Imagine you are looking at a map of the world, and you draw a thick, heavy line from the coast of West Africa all the way to the ports of the American South. For centuries, this line was a one-way street of history, tragedy, and resilience. We have always known the broad strokes of this story, but the fine details have been shrouded in mystery. Many Black Americans have grown up with a sense of their heritage that feels like a beautiful but incomplete puzzle. You might have been told your family originated from a specific tribe, or perhaps from a specific region like Nigeria or Senegal. But when a massive team of geneticists recently launched one of the most comprehensive studies ever conducted, comparing the DNA of over 50,000 Black Americans with the DNA of thousands of people across diverse regions in West and Central Africa, they realized the puzzle was much more complex than anyone anticipated. What they found didn't just confirm the history books. It revealed a genetic mixture so intricate and so specific that it actually surprised the experts. This isn't just a story about where people came from. It is a story about how a new, unique genetic identity was forged in the fire of the American experience. To jump right into the center of this discovery, we have to talk about the overrepresentation factor. For a long time, popular wisdom suggested that Black American ancestry would be a fairly even spread across the Atlantic coast of Africa. But the genetic data told a different story. Scientists found an overwhelming concentration of DNA from the Bight of Biafra, which is modern-day Nigeria. While historical records of the slave trade are extensive, the DNA shows that the genetic contribution of the people from these specific regions was much higher than the shipping manifests would lead you to believe. This means that certain groups of people were more successful at passing down their genetic legacy through the generations, creating a Nigerian-heavy profile that dominates the Black American genome today. But here is where the surprise really set in for the researchers. When they compared these results to the DNA of people currently living in Nigeria, the match wasn't as simple as a mirror image. The Black American population carries a multi-tribal signature that literally does not exist in Africa. In West Africa, genetic groups are often tied to specific ethnic identities like the Yoruba, the Igbo, or the Hausa, who stayed in relatively distinct geographic areas for centuries. But in the United States, that wall between ethnic groups was instantly torn down. On the plantations of Virginia or the fields of Mississippi, someone with Yoruba ancestry would marry someone with Mende ancestry or Wolof ancestry. This created a mega-African genetic profile. A Black American today might carry the DNA of 6 or 7 different African ethnic groups that would never have mixed back home. Geneticists realized they weren't just looking at African DNA in America. They were looking at a New World African identity that is biologically distinct from any single population on the African continent. The researchers used a technique called local ancestry deconvolution. This allows them to look at a single strand of DNA and pinpoint exactly which part of the world every little segment comes from. When they zoomed in, they found another layer of the mixture that sparked intense discussion in the scientific community. They found a significant European input, which on average accounts for about 24% of the Black American genome. But the surprising part wasn't the percentage, it was the gender bias hidden in the code. By looking at the mitochondrial DNA, which is passed only from mothers, and the Y chromosome, which is passed only from fathers, the scientists could see a clear and heartbreaking pattern. The vast majority of the European DNA came from paternal lines, while the African DNA was overwhelmingly preserved on the maternal side. This serves as a biological record of the power dynamics of the past, proving that DNA is not just a list of ingredients, but a witness to history. One of the most fascinating aspects of this study was the intra-American variation. The geneticist found that the mix isn't the same everywhere in the US. If you are a Black American with roots in South Carolina or Georgia, your DNA often shows a higher percentage of African markers, specifically from the Rice Coast or Sierra Leone. This is because the enslaved people in these regions were often kept in larger, more isolated groups to work on rice plantations, which allowed their African genetic signatures to remain more concentrated over the centuries. In contrast, if your roots are in the Upper South like Virginia or Maryland, the European percentage tends to be higher, reflecting a different social and economic structure. The scientists were stunned to see how accurately the modern DNA mapped onto the specific agricultural patterns of the 1700s and 1800s. Another massive surprise for the researchers was the indigenous American component. For generations, many Black American families have shared oral traditions of having Native American ancestry, often specifically cited as Cherokee or Choctaw. However, when the geneticists looked at the autosomal DNA, they found that while this ancestry does exist, it is much less prevalent than the oral histories suggest. The average native signature in the Black American population is about 1%. This led to a fascinating theory, the social ancestry theory. Geneticists believe that in many cases, shared experiences of struggle and a shared outsider status led to a cultural merging. Families may have adopted the Native American story as a way to explain their connection to the land or to honor a shared history of resistance, even if the biological overlap was smaller than the cultural one. The scientists also discovered something they call genetic homogenization. Because of the Great Migration in the early 20th century, when millions of Black Americans moved from the rural South to the urban North and West, the regional genetic differences began to blur. A person whose ancestors were from a Nigerian-heavy community in Louisiana might move to Chicago and marry someone with Senegambian-heavy roots from North Carolina. This has turned the Black American population into one of the most genetically diverse yet cohesive groups in the world. They are a global crossroads contained within a single population. In many ways, the Black American genome is a preview of what the future of humanity might look like as the world becomes more interconnected. But let's talk about the surprise from the African side of the study. When the researchers shared their data with scientists in West Africa, the African researchers were fascinated by the fossilized nature of the DNA. Much like a time capsule, the Black American genome contains genetic variants from 18th century West Africa that have since become rare or have shifted on the continent today. Because Africa itself has seen massive migrations, wars, and population shifts in the last 300 years, the West African DNA in an American person might actually be a more direct link to the ancient ancestors of a specific region than the DNA of someone currently living there. It's a paradox of history. To find the old Africa, scientists sometimes have to look in the New World. The study also delved into the founder effect. In some parts of the Americas, particularly in places like the Gullah Geechee Islands or even certain communities in the Caribbean, a small group of original ancestors has left a massive genetic footprint. This has allowed scientists to identify rare variants, genetic bits that are almost never seen in the general world population, but are common within these specific groups. These variants are incredibly valuable for medical research. By studying the unique mix of Black American DNA, doctors are learning more about how to treat conditions like sickle cell anemia, heart disease, and hypertension. The mixture that surprised geneticists isn't just a curiosity. It is a key that is unlocking new ways to save lives and improve health outcomes for millions of people. One of the most impactful findings related to the Middle Passage. Historical records show that roughly 12.5 million people were taken from Africa, but only about 10.7 million survived the journey to the Americas. The DNA reveals the genetic cost of this event. The scientists found that certain genetic lineages simply stopped. They can see the ghosts of African families that were lost to history because they never had the chance to pass on their DNA in the New World. But they also see the survivors. The Black American genome is composed of the most resilient segments of DNA. It is a biological record of people who survived incredible odds, and that survivorship is written into the very chemistry of the population. For the audience listening, you might wonder how this affects your own home DNA test results. Many people are frustrated when they see broad categories like West Africa or Congolese without more detail. The reason for this is the intermixing we discussed. Because Black American DNA is a recombination of so many different African groups, each of your chromosomes is like a patchwork quilt. One tiny square might be from the Igbo people, the next square from the Kru people, and the next from the Fula. This is why the mix surprised geneticists. They didn't realize just how tight the patchwork was. It's not a collection of separate pieces. It's a new, woven fabric. The study also touched on Latin American connections. They found that Black Americans share significant hidden DNA with populations in Brazil, Cuba, and Colombia. This is because the same original African founder groups were often split up and sent to different parts of the Americas. You might have a genetic cousin in Rio de Janeiro whose ancestor was on the same boat as your ancestor in Charleston. This transatlantic brotherhood is something that can only be seen through the lens of modern genetics. It proves that the Black diaspora is not just a cultural concept, but a biological reality that spans 2 continents and dozens of countries. What makes this surprising mix so powerful is that it challenges the old binaries of race. For a long time, the world tried to put people into neat boxes, but the DNA says there are no boxes. The Black American genome is a bridge. It is a bridge between Africa and Europe, between the old world and the new, and between the ancestors and the future. The scientists expressed a sense of awe at how much information was packed into these samples. They realized that by studying this population, they were studying the history of the world itself. Every person's DNA was a mini history book, with chapters on the spice trade, the cotton industry, and the civil rights movement. The researchers also pointed out the genetic innovators. In the face of a new environment, new diseases, and new diets, the Black American genome has undergone rapid adaptation. This is a process where certain beneficial genetic traits become more common very quickly to help a population survive. The mismatch or difference between West African and Black American DNA is often found in these areas of adaptation. This shows that the population wasn't just static. It was actively evolving to meet the challenges of the American landscape. As we look at the broader implications of this stunning mix, it's important to realize that the surprise isn't a sign of confusion. It's a sign of complexity. Geneticists admitted that they had underestimated the sheer intelligence of the human genome. They didn't expect to see so much intentionality in the way DNA is preserved and changed. The Black American story is one of the most intense examples of human acceleration in history. In just 400 years, a completely new genetic profile was established that is as distinct and recognizable as any ancient population that has existed for thousands of years. The scientists also noted the missing pieces. Despite having thousands of samples, there are still parts of the African continent that are underrepresented in the data, such as parts of Central Africa and the interior. This means there are still secrets waiting to be discovered in the Black American genome. There are likely entire ethnic groups that contributed to the American story whose DNA hasn't even been fully mapped in Africa yet. The surprise is only the beginning of a much longer journey of discovery. For anyone who feels disconnected from their history, this study offers a new kind of connection. It says that your history isn't just in a book that might have been lost. It is inside you. It is a literal part of your physical being. You are the sum total of thousands of years of African history, hundreds of years of American history, and a modern fusion that is unique in the world. The mix that surprised the world is the very thing that makes the population so strong and so unique. The geneticists concluded their report with a note of profound respect. They realized that the Black American genome is a map of endurance. Every mismatch, every surprising segment, and every unique combination is a tribute to the people who kept their culture and their families alive against all odds. It is a story of unbroken continuity despite broken history. And as we continue to refine these tests and gather more data, the picture will only get clearer. We are moving toward a time where we can not only say where you are from, but exactly how your ancestors' journey shaped the person you are today. This study changes everything we thought we knew about ancestry. It proves that we aren't just a list of percentages on a screen. We are a living, breathing collision of cultures. The Black American profile is a testament to the fact that you can take people away from their home, but you cannot take the home out of their DNA. Instead, they take that home and they build something even bigger with it. They create a global heritage that belongs to the whole world. As you think about your own results, or the results of those around you, look at the mix not as a confusion, but as a symphony. It is a collection of many different voices, from different tribes, different languages, and different struggles, all coming together to create a single, powerful song of identity. The scientists were surprised because they were looking for a solitary note, but what they found was a masterpiece. Stay curious about your genetic story. Keep asking the questions, and don't be afraid of the mismatches or the surprises. Those are the parts of your DNA where the real story is hidden. The Black American mix is one of the most fascinating chapters in human history, and we are just beginning to read it. It is a story of a people who were forced into a new world and ended up creating a new genetic reality that the world is only now starting to understand. The study of DNA is a reminder that we are all much more connected than we think. The lines we draw on maps are nothing compared to the lines that connect our hearts and our histories. In the world of genetics, there are no strangers, only cousins we haven't met yet. And in the story of Black American DNA, the surprise is simply the realization that the family tree is much bigger and much more beautiful than we ever dared to imagine. As scientists continue to compare the old world and the new, the gap between us will continue to close, replaced by a deep understanding of our shared human journey. We hope this deep dive into the genetic mix has given you a new perspective on the power of ancestry. Your DNA is a treasure map, and every discovery brings us closer to the truth of who we are. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep celebrating the surprising mix that makes us all part of the incredible story of humanity. The wait for the final answers may be long, but every discovery along the way is its own reward. The Black American genome is a shining example of how even in the face of the greatest challenges, the human spirit and the human code will always find a way to thrive, to mix, and to create something absolutely stunning.